Hello everyone, and for the first time ever, I can say welcome back to Paranormal Community College. My name is Riley, and today we're jumping right back into Skinwalker Ranch. But before we get into that, if you'd like to support a beginner podcaster like me, please make sure to subscribe or leave a review, and if you're feeling generous, it is my birthday week, so if you'd like to leave me a tip, my Venmo is at paranormal_RILEY. I really want to make this podcast as awesome as can be with more mics so I can have guests and co-hosts on the show, so anything helps. Hopefully I will have merch up by next week or so stick around for that. All right, but enough of that. Let's continue on our stroll down the path of the Skinwalker. So we left off with the Sherman family finally leaving the ranch, but Terry, the father, needed closure. Perhaps they all did. So he ends up selling his ranch to Robert Bigelow, a slightly eccentric real estate and aerospace investor, and someone who has used his billions to study the supernatural and the unexplained. In fact, he has spent more money than anyone else in history on paranormal research. Bigelow created a scientific research-based team called the National Institute for Discovery Science, and his goal at Skinwalker Ranch was to create a living laboratory to study various paranormal phenomena. Founded in 1995, the overall approach of Bigelow's program was to use the scientific method to conduct experiments and hopefully find some answers about all the paranormal phenomenon going on at the ranch. Bigelow owned the ranch from 1996 to 2016, and this is also where the U.S. Department of Defense comes in and starts partially funding the research at Skinwalker Ranch. I don't care how skeptical you are, the fact that the Department of Defense was willing to provide millions of dollars to Bigelow and the NIDS team, that at least means that the government had reasonable suspicion or reasonable evidence that something was going on at the ranch, and maybe the government needed to know if it was a potential threat or something worth studying. But before we head back to Skinwalker Ranch, I actually want to talk about another area of activity around the ranch because I think it's definitely worth mentioning. I want to talk about a place called Bottle Hollow. This is another aspect of the Skinwalker Ranch legend that I rarely hear people talk about on podcasts or TV shows, but according to locals and the Ute tribe in particular, it's another mysterious place that just adds to the weirdness of the Uinta Basin. Bottle Hollow Reservoir is just a 10-minute drive from Skinwalker Ranch, and there are many tales to come out of that area. There are an abnormal amount of drowning incidents. At least that was what was reported by George Knapp and Hunt for the Skinwalker in the 90s, and I did find some articles from the early 2000s that mentioned this as well. Stories of a sea serpent of some kind or a large lake monster are known in the area, and in Ute mythology and folklore, there are various stories of lake monsters and haunted campgrounds, not just here at Bottle Hollow, but all throughout Utah. In fact, there's often an emphasis on Navajo legends when it comes to Skinwalker Ranch, but we rarely take a look at Ute legends. Along with lake monsters, the Utes believed in water babies. These dwarf-like water spirits lived in lakes, rivers, and streams, and they would lure victims to the water by imitating the sound of a crying infant. In some versions, these water babies are the spirits of children who have drowned and are crying out for their mothers. If one comes into contact with them, they will become sick and die, or they may be drowned by these spirits. Stories going as far back as the 1800s tell of ghostly apparitions of native warriors seen around the lake, only to disappear before their eyes. These ghosts, adorned in leather and furs, may join you around the campfire, their solemn faces visible through the orange flickers of the flames. According to natives, the real home of the Skinwalker is not at Skinwalker Ranch, but in a canyon or cave near Bottle Hollow Reservoir. One security guard at Bottle Hollow claimed he saw a, quote, big round thing. He said, quote, I could smell it. Even after it was gone, I could smell it. He says he tried to chase after it and it looked like it had gone through some trash cans and kind of left a mess in the area. On another occasion, he saw a big round thing with coal red eyes. When he tried to shine the flashlight on it, his flashlight would stop working, so this creature apparently has anti-flashlight powers of some kind. Well, guess what? Many claim to have seen Bigfoot in the area. Yep, everyone's favorite cryptid also lurks around the Uinta Basin. I don't know, maybe just as a rule, Bigfoot manifests any place that's exceptionally bizarre. I mean, Skinwalker Ranch really couldn't be the Area 51 of the unexplained without Sasquatch. And that strong, musky smell is commonly reported with other Bigfoot sightings. So, sightings of a big, hairy, smelly something with red eyes have been reported, and some have claimed to see the creature run in front of their car or rummage around campgrounds at night. But there may just be a Bigfoot who likes the desert, because apparently he's been seen a lot in New Mexico and Arizona too. Others claim to see strange objects or lights fly out of the lake in the direction of Skinwalker Ranch. Strange lights and strangely colored objects have been seen beneath the waters as well. So there's kind of a brief description of Bottle Hollow. Even if Skinwalker Ranch is in the middle of all of it, the whole basin is strange. But let's get back to Bigelow and Skinwalker Ranch. When consulting with Bigelow and George Knapp about strategy and how they were going to conduct this ambitious experiment, Terry Sherman told them, quote, "This phenomenon needs to be hunted like a wild animal." If you watch the show, The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch on History Channel, you know that they say all the time that whatever is happening, whether it's a secret government program going on, alien activity, some type of atmospheric phenomenon, the Skinwalker or whatever, it just knows when it's being watched or recorded. And it doesn't like to act up or manifest in any way when that is going down, which is, of course, super inconvenient for the rest of us watching the show. Terry was known to hide in ditches as if he was hunting a wild animal, just waiting for something to happen, and sure enough, something would. The NIDS team also managed to lure this thing out even with all of their fancy cameras and equipment. And remember, this isn't a team of History Channel people or UFO researchers who are just obsessed with aliens and the paranormal. These were often ex-military, and some military employees were even hired as security guards and other personnel. I'm going to try my best to go in chronological order, but it can be difficult and there's a lot of experiences to cover, so bear with me. Okay, so George Knapp said almost immediately he got this sense of weirdness coming onto the property. He could just feel the tension or kind of an ominous vibe emanating from Skinwalker Ranch. On November 13th, 1996, George Knapp and the NIDS team saw a yellow light moving around rapidly, making a 360-degree circle over their heads before speeding off. He said the light made no sound. That seems benign enough and really kind of cool. Whether it was paranormal or something totally explainable, who knows, but things were about to get pretty disturbing. And the activity the NIDS team experienced, who again, they're a group of scientists and military men who pride themselves as rational problem solvers, would constantly frustrate and perplex them. Now, what would normally happen is Terry would call the team when weird stuff started to happen or after a strange event. They weren't all there every single day, just to be clear. In January of 1997, they found 2 calves that were mutilated and they seemingly had no explanation for it. One of the calves notably had its ears trimmed where the tag would be, and the other one had punctured eyelids, just perfectly circular holes in its eyelids. The NIDS team brought on a vet, and the vet simply said, well, maybe it was a coyote. Because yeah, a totally normal coyote came along, drained the calves of all their blood, and made holes in the eyelids. That's totally normal coyote behavior. I mean, I don't know what's more terrifying, this being unexplainable or caused by some kind of paranormal or supernatural creature, or that maybe coyotes have developed advanced surgical technology and are using it for really weird purposes. If it's the latter, I think we should all be terrified, personally. And I mean, come on. It's more believable that aliens did this than a freaking coyote. This next mutilation that occurred in March of 1997 is pretty brutal, just as a warning. It made my stomach turn a little when I first read it. So, according to Terry, it was mutilated in broad daylight. He found the young Black Angus calf just lying there, dismembered. Its legs lying on the ground neatly about 10 feet away. The internal organs were gone. There was no blood, and the tags were cut off. George Knapp notes that it was so strange, so unsettling to see something so brutal against the backdrop of this quiet, otherwise beautiful and pristine background. What was unsettling to me is this is the first time I believe that a mutilation included dismemberment. And it's so sad. And yeah, I don't think a coyote is going to neatly leave the poor calf's legs on the ground. Now, they still kept dogs on the ranch, and after this incident, the dogs refused to come out of their kennels for 3 days. They eventually did come out, but they seemed traumatized and skittish and just not themselves. The night they finally came out of their kennels, the team was alarmed to hear the dogs howling and barking hysterically. The cows were also running around erratically. They saw one cow in particular that had been separated from the herd, and they could identify 2 yellow lights in her general direction. And remember, in part 1, I think I mentioned that those yellow lights were often seen before a mutilation was about to happen. But on this particularly chaotic night, something even stranger happened. About 50 yards away, they saw what seemed like 1 or maybe 2 large predators in the brush or maybe up in a tree. They saw the bright yellow eyes of a predator maybe 20 feet off the ground. Terry grabs a rifle and shoots the shadowy figures, and they all see the yellow eyes disappear. Terry was excited. He was beyond excited. This was the evidence or explanation he wanted and needed. He had finally got what was maybe harassing him and his family and his cattle. And George Knapp reiterates that Terry was known for having excellent eyesight and excellent hearing. He was an experienced marksman and hunter, and he was positive he shot it and saw it go down. However, when they went to see what Terry had shot, there was almost nothing there. There certainly wasn't any kind of creature. Terry said, quote, "That sucker must have been 400 pounds. Throughout the book, Terry gets really worked up about the phenomenon at times. He gets really pissed off, it seems. And this was one of those times. Visibly frustrated and baffled, Terry was beside himself. The NIDS team looked around, and they did find a strange type of footprint. They saw a footprint that looked like some kind of large bird of prey. Some say it looked like a raptor print. But we all know raptors don't exist anymore, right? Except, you know what? They probably do at Skinwalker Ranch. Like, at this point, I'd be surprised if there wasn't dinosaurs on the ranch. What are we missing at this point? Let's see. What is missing from the Skinwalker Ranch Encyclopedia of the Bizarre? So far, there is no leprechauns. I was going to say no Loch Ness Monster, but we do have lake monsters at Bottle Hollow, so I'm really wondering what kind of supernatural creature is missing? Unicorns? There's no unicorns as far as we know. We kind of have mermaids with the Ute water babies who lure people to their death, much like sirens. I want to say no dragons, except that would actually even be a lie because the current ranch manager's name is freaking Dragon. Okay, but anyway, the print's depth indicated that it had significant weight, so maybe Terry's estimation of 400 pounds wasn't far off. Was it a big-ass bird of prey that Terry missed with his bullet, or was it a raptor? Or maybe it was something else. I think they did say there was a strange odor in the vicinity as well. And as a side note, it is also said that occasionally the NIDS team and Terry would see animals that weren't necessarily alarming, just unnatural to the area. They claimed they'd catch glimpses of them, like they looked like these tropical, multicolored birds or large spiders that just didn't belong there. And a hyena-like creature we'll hear about towards the end of the episode was also seen there. Between January and April of 1997, 5 animals were mutilated. George Knapp claimed whenever they showed up after a cattle mutilation that the atmosphere was just laden with a thick, creepy miasma. After the 5th mutilation, the dogs were again huddled in their kennels, refusing to eat or drink and acting traumatized. Going on almost 3 years of losing cattle, Gwen says after admiring a few of their black Angus cattle grazing in a field, quote, "I would go out of my mind if I lost any of those animals." She says that as they are leaving the ranch on an errand, they return 45 minutes later to find those cattle were missing. Gwen was crying at this point. It's like it knew, it heard her. It knew how much she loved her cattle, and it was purposely messing with her. They searched the ranch and they found the cattle in an abandoned shed that was padlocked from the outside. They hadn't used it in so long that there were cobwebs on the padlock. Once they were able to get to the cattle, they were relieved to find them alive, but they appeared to be in a catatonic state. The NIDS team discovers that the shed was highly magnetized, but faded after 48 hours. The NIDS team would also notice round mechanical tracks that seemed to appear out of nowhere. They'd be in the brush and they'd smell some strong, mysterious musk, like what that security guard smelled when he saw that big round thing. Some also saw one of those blue orbs, but the one they saw, they said, was like the size of a basketball, which is closer to what others in the area have reported, but the ones Terry and his family initially reported seemed to be much smaller. Now, if you're a seasoned UFO buff, then you probably have heard of Colonel John B. Alexander. He is a retired Air Force officer and now a big part of the UFO community, and he was also the very first employee of Bigelow's NIDS team and spent 6 years at Skinwalker Ranch. A story he recalls took place one early evening near Homestead Number 2, which is where a lot of paranormal activity seems to happen and where Geiger counters often pick up on abnormal and dangerous amounts of radiation. This is also the homestead where everyone says they feel like they're in a crowded room even when they're all alone. Colonel Alexander said one night they saw something in the Russian olive trees near that homestead. It was like a shimmering outline or almost invisible outline of something, but what it was, they couldn't tell. I think he's described it before as kind of like a distortion, like if it was something using some type of cloaking mechanism. I think they saw this creature or phenomenon twice, and it reminds me of the predator creature Terry, his son, and that hippie meditator guy saw. He claimed they saw it jumping through the trees. In another instance, it was shot at, and the team members present thought they saw something fall from the trees and run off, but again, it was almost invisible, just like a distortion. Colonel Alexander also said things would go missing often, or equipment would seem to be moved around or messed up with seemingly no explanation. He says it was like they could never get ahead of this phenomenon. It became quickly evident that the NIDS team was not the one in control. No matter what kind of fancy, expensive equipment they had or what kind of scientific experiments they had set up, this phenomena, supernatural or not, was always 10 steps ahead of them, and it was never predictable. The only thing that happened with any sense of predictability was that when they would bring cattle onto the ranch, activity would almost always increase for a while. Another hotspot of activity is the mesa, also known as Skinwalker Ridge. This is where people claim to have seen UFOs flying in and out of the mesa, or have seen the mesa light up inexplicably. But a military security guard who worked for the NIDS team for 6 years claimed he saw giant canine paw prints along Skinwalker Ridge, and when you look at these pictures, it is pretty terrifying, and at least someone was taking pictures finally. Even if this is just a large wolf roaming around out there and totally not paranormal in any way, it's still kind of freaky. They are deep paw prints indicating that this is a heavy animal. The stride is also huge, indicating that this would be much larger than the average wolf. Even weirder, he claims he found a small crevice along the side of the mesa. So there's the side of the mesa that is mostly fallen rocks and boulders, and he said he found a crevice, and inside that small cavity, he found a large canine trap, like an old one. And he has pictures of this as well. Did the Shermans put one out there? It would maybe make sense since we know they had that direwolf encounter, but who knows, maybe even the Myers put one out there because in the pictures it does look pretty old. So maybe too old to have been put there by the Shermans. And that would suggest that maybe the Myers saw that same wolf. There's even a story, I think it may have been in the very first season of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, where this man is retelling a story he experienced when he was a young boy. He was out hunting near Skinwalker Ridge, if I remember correctly, near one of those creepy homesteads that are located throughout the property. Now, you used to be able to drive through Skinwalker Ranch and everything, but you definitely can't do that now. So this is long ago. Well, he claims that he saw what he believed to be maybe a skinwalker. I believe he said it was black and looked kind of like a wolf, but also kind of like a man, and that it had red eyes. When he saw this thing, he ran home and claimed he felt some type of evil haunted him for weeks after. He would see large shadows outside his window at night. When he was telling his story, the man even became physically ill and emotional and had to be helped out of the area. But now we've come to the part of the story that is perhaps the most compelling. However, I am saving what I think is the weirdest, creepiest story for the very end, because it's also one of the last Sherman experiences. But anyway, so it was a beautiful, clear night. The NIDS team was along the ridge overlooking a large pasture. Other team members were surveying another area of the property. One was meditating because they found meditation often encouraged activity on the ranch. One, somehow the only dude with night vision binoculars, saw something in the distance in the pasture below that the other team members couldn't see completely. They just saw what looked like a little ball of slightly luminescent dust. However, this little ball grew in size and radiance, and according to the guy with the night vision binoculars, it stretched into what he described as a portal. He claims he saw a large humanoid figure walk out of it. He saw, with the night vision goggles, the round ball just elongated into a visible tunnel. The guy with the night vision said, quote, "Jesus Christ, something's in that tunnel. There's a black creature coming out. I can see its head. It has no face. Oh my God, it just climbed out. A big black creature just crawled out of that tunnel and walked away." He says it was maybe 6 feet tall and about 400 pounds, so he's a hefty guy. The team recognized a sulfur smell in the vicinity when they went down to check it out, but nothing else seemed out of the ordinary. No magnetic spikes, no radiation, no footprints. They had tried to take pictures of the alleged portal, but of course, the pictures didn't turn out well. The team also claimed that there would be fogs and mist that seemingly appeared and disappeared out of nowhere. One guy said he saw a black figure through his binoculars and that the black figure told him telepathically, "We're watching you." Super creepy if true. In July 1998, Terry called the team frantic, saying that all their camera equipment had been disabled, like someone had come along and ripped out all the wiring. The cameras that did still work didn't pick up anything visible to explain what had happened, even though they were pointing right at those other cameras. George Knapp says the team was completely flummoxed. How could this be when the camera didn't have any missing footage and was faced directly towards the cameras that were disabled? They should have been able to see something, even if it was just Terry messing with the equipment for some reason. Now, apparently there's another strange animal seen at Skinwalker Ranch and in the general vicinity as well. And this is another thing people often forget to mention when talking about Skinwalker Ranch. It looks kind of like a hyena. It's kind of short and stocky, but has muscular legs, a stout torso, a short bushy tail, and reddish fur. One day, Terry and Gwen noticed that a corral that has a few horses in it appears to have some sort of other animal in it harassing the horses. At first, they think it's a dog, but Gwen says, "That ain't no dog." It moved so quickly it was hard to tell exactly what it was. It was kind of like a reddish blur in the corral, but Terry described it as a kind of like a short and stocky hyena with reddish fur. Now, since I had to look up what a direwolf looked like, I decided to go ahead and research if there was maybe any kind of prehistoric animal in North America that resembled a hyena. And sure enough, there was an animal that we call today, I'm gonna mess this up probably, Chasmoportheides. But it went extinct 780,000 years ago. That's much older than the extinction of the direwolf, and I know that's super crazy of me to look that up in the first place, but I was also intrigued that George Knapp said they would see these other unknown, maybe even tropical animals on the property that shouldn't be there. And that maybe Skinwalker Ranch is one of these places on the planet where time and space is just kind of wonky. And what I found online even said that it is likely that these hyena-like mammals were stockier than their modern-day progeny, so maybe my theory isn't totally crazy. But I've saved what I think is the weirdest story experienced during the NIDS era for last. Others may disagree with me, but there's something about this last story in particular that is just super creepy. And I had never once heard this story on any podcast or documentary until I read The Hunt for the Skinwalker. One day, Terry and his son were herding cattle away from an alfalfa field, but the cattle refused to go back to the ranch, so they had to lead them on a kind of roundabout loop along the river to get them to go back. They were about 50 yards away from the creek when, out of nowhere, these golf ball-sized blood-red balls abruptly flew into view and came directly at them from the creek. These little balls, whatever they were on a rampage. The horses and cattle start freaking out. The mysterious balls were herding some of the cattle into the river. Also, mysterious balls is just fun to say. But they were causing some of them to injure themselves as they fell down into the ditch and into the water. When they returned to the ranch and began telling Gwen what had happened, Gwen's heart fell to her stomach as she saw for herself one of those blood-red balls appear over her son's head. They said those red balls induced the same kind of dread and icky feeling that those blue orbs did. Terry and the son were having trouble processing what had just happened, and the family, returned very little to the ranch after that. And according to George Knapp, they now live in another state entirely. So, what do we think of it all? Did the NIDS team make any groundbreaking discoveries? Unfortunately, not really, at least nothing tangible. Nothing where we can say, yes, without a doubt, there is unknown creatures there or alien activity because we got it on camera. Now, they did find a mysterious metallic substance apparently, and possibly other things too, but Bigelow and NIDS aren't allowed to talk about it or show it to anyone because remember, they got that Department of Defense money. Allegedly, some of this material is kept at Bigelow Airspace in Las Vegas, but that's just speculation. There's things about the ranch they are still not allowed to talk about, but to be honest, I don't think anyone knows what's going on over there. I think it's just going to be a never-ending puzzle. However, maybe Robert Bigelow did uncover something strange at Skinwalker Ranch. He has gone on national television and podcasts and tells people without a doubt he is 100% positive there is extraterrestrial life visiting this planet. And it is a bit compelling given his relationship to the government and the military and with several prominent politicians. Remember, he has spent more money than anyone else on the planet when it comes to paranormal studies. Terry claimed that the NIDS team was too heavy-handed with all the technology and equipment. Who knows? George Knapp wonders if perhaps the scientific method doesn't work in this kind of scenario. That whatever they were dealing with is just too unpredictable. It can't be successfully studied in a living laboratory type of scenario. So I haven't watched every single episode of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch just because I kind of don't like the Curse of Oak Island vibe, and because it can be so frustrating to watch their equipment fail over and over again. But let's talk about some things. They found an anomaly in the atmosphere above the ranch, like this triangular anomaly in the sky, but they can't get anything to go up there successfully. Equipment will malfunction even when they send drones above the anomaly. Also, when they've tried to run experiments with it, black helicopters or other aircraft show up in the sky as if to say, hey, we're checking on you, don't get too close. And they show up within minutes. They have brought seasoned Air Force veterans and the Utah Attorney General up there, and they have confirmed that these are military Black Hawk helicopters. But there's not a base that we know of so close by that one can get there in minutes. So it seems like the government still cares about Skinwalker Ranch. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so interested or concerned about their experiments. They've found that there is what appears to be a 300 to 400 foot anomaly inside Skinwalker Ridge, and it looks dome-shaped. I'm not up to date with the current season, but I think that's actually tonight's episode. I think they're trying to, yet again, dig on Skinwalker Ridge. And while I haven't watched it yet, I can almost guarantee that all their equipment's going to start working and we're never going to find out what is in there. They discovered this anomaly with radar, but of course haven't been able to get to it completely, hence why the show can be so frustrating. But just because it's dome-shaped like a UFO doesn't mean it's a spaceship, although that would be super awesome. It could totally be something geological that may or may not be contributing to the weirdness and radiation spikes at Skinwalker Ranch. They've captured this pretty compelling orb video, and I hate those paranormal caught-on-camera videos where they clearly mistake a piece of dust or a bug or something for some kind of paranormal orb. But the one they pick up in, I think, season 3 or 4 is interesting because it appears to be moving with clear intent, and it's moving against the direction of the wind. They've brought on this guy who he himself has designed ground-penetrating radar equipment and has conducted thousands of experiments with it without failure. But as soon as this guy was brought on Skinwalker Ranch, his equipment picked up abnormal wavelength readings he had never seen before. He asked everyone to turn off their phones and any other devices, but the signal was still the same. He claimed he thought this whole Skinwalker Ranch thing was kind of silly, but he was willing to come out and run some tests. But this was significantly abnormal to him. Digging on the ranch is considered with great caution. Remember, Robert Bigelow said, bad things happen to people and animals when you dig on the ranch. The crew wears Geiger counters on them at all times, and other radiation detecting equipment is monitored in order to move the team out of areas where they have spikes in radiation. They can get what appears to be radiation sickness, and when tested for radiation at various times, some people on the ranch have had much higher than average radiation levels. At those old abandoned homesteads, people report feeling weak and nauseous and getting severe headaches. In that area, there have been random high spikes of radiation. One of the first stories they tell on, I think, the very first episode is that of a team member who experienced brain swelling and had to go to the hospital. So, health concerns about radiation are very real and taken seriously. They just wonder if at times when no physical symptoms are present, that someone is maybe hacking their system and luring them out of the area by creating false radiation readings. Or their Geiger counters will be normal, but the equipment in the command center detects a dramatic spike. The poltergeist activity doesn't seem to happen in the house anymore, but the current people who live in the ranch house claim to hear strange rumblings noises or knocking noises coming from the basement or from the earth. So let's get into some theories. Theory number 1, they're all lying and or delusional, and we're buying into a bunch of weird shit that is just too bizarre and crazy to even be real. I don't believe that theory, obviously, but it's worth talking about. Did the Shermans do those things to their own cattle for insurance money? Were they losing money on the ranch and they needed a way out? But if that was the reason, why didn't Terry document this with pictures? Did they really fabricate this elaborate and highly imaginative story? And like I said, if they did, kudos to them, because this story, real or not, is really freaking interesting. But what of the other townspeople who support their claims and who have had such a strong background of just weird stuff happening in the area in general, and the abnormally high amount of UFO sightings? Theory number 2, my favorite theory, is that this is related to portals. And everyone thinking I'm crazy right now, y'all believe everything Einstein says. Why is it so hard to believe that he was right about wormholes too, and that we just don't yet possess the math or technology or knowledge of how space and time really works to create them ourselves or navigate them ourselves? Maybe another intelligence can. Maybe they are naturally occurring and there is a naturally occurring one or multiple at Skinwalker Ranch and or Bottle Hollow. What if the government created it, whether on accident or on purpose, Stranger Things style? And what about those voices in another language Terry and his friend heard, and that Dr. Travis Taylor and Eric Bard heard as well? What if, for whatever reason, the wires are getting crossed between time and dimensions, and especially if it's interdimensional, we wouldn't always be able to perceive it with our own eyes? Maybe when people claim to feel like they are in a crowded room, like at those homesteads, they are sensing whoever is there but is existing in another dimension entirely. There is a common belief that there are places on Earth that, for whatever reason, seem to be hotspots for UFO activity or generally unexplained phenomenon. Think Bermuda Triangle and the like. They've also been referred to as window areas. Areas where the veil between dimensions is just thinner, wires are easily crossed, and worlds are easily crossed. A few episodes from now, we are going to be talking about time slips and dimension slips, so if this is an interesting topic to you, stay tuned for that episode. But I'm just saying, portals aren't as crazy and sci-fi as they may sound to us right now. I think we should have an open mind about it anyway, but that's just me. Number 3 is the Skinwalker theory. The theory that there is a creature who can manipulate time and space by themselves and cause people to see and hear things that aren't there. What if it is a being that has had thousands of years of evolution more than us and can do those remarkable things like cloak itself? Or what if it is an interdimensional being, an archetypal trickster spirit who just likes to mess with people? Because how eerie was it when Gwen said out loud, "I would go out of my mind if I lost those animals," and then less than an hour later, they disappeared and ended up in a locked shed? What if the reason some of the activity is so cartoonishly bizarre is because this being or this phenomena plays upon human fears or suspicions? That's why people claim to see aliens or UFOs or Bigfoot or prehistoric creatures like raptors and direwolves, hyenas and tropical birds, giant spiders. Now, I personally don't believe there are humans out there who are evil witches capable of changing their molecular makeup in order to turn into a wolf or coyote. That's just me. But on, I think, either season 3 or 4, there was a couple young men from the Ute Nation who claimed they saw a weird cat-like creature that just looked off. Its face looked a little humanish, and it was just walking funny, but they said it didn't seem hostile at all and was actually kind of skittish, so who knows? And then there's another theory. We know there's abnormal amounts of radiation up there, or inconsistent levels depending on the day of the week or who is more sensitive to its effects. Maybe there's some type of atmospheric and or geologic phenomenon up there that is just making people see strange things. But then there's the shared experiences. Sure, shared delusions and folie à deux happen sometimes, but it's extremely rare. It's not something that happens so often to so many different kinds of people at the same place over time, unless perhaps there is something strange in the atmosphere that maybe isn't alien or supernatural, just unknown to us right now. I don't know. This is the theory Dr. Travis Taylor, the head of investigations at Skinwalker Ranch, currently tends to believe, it seems. And the theory that there are geological anomalies interacting with some sort of atmospheric anomaly is so far the most sound scientifically. Perhaps our science and tech is just not capable of measuring it quite yet. But it very well could be to blame for all the so-called paranormal phenomenon. What if the reason why people claim their equipment or other belongings go missing and end up in weird places isn't because of some trickster playing an annoying game of hide and seek? What if the radiation, what if the unknown anomalies or the high levels of gilsonite are causing forgetfulness or abnormal behavior in the humans who work there? Sedona, Arizona, that is also a hot spot of activity with its own weird ranch called Bradshaw Ranch, has high amounts of quartz in the area, and many believe it's a contributing factor to all the unexplained phenomenon said to occur there. As for the UFOs, there's just so many reports of them in the area. Not every single one of those people can be lying or too stupid to tell a difference between a shooting star and the fact that, hey, a giant black triangle in the sky isn't very natural. I don't know if I think it's alien. I think if there are portals at Skinwalker Ranch, potentially anything and everything could walk through. I think if this phenomenon affects our minds in some way we don't understand, seeing UFOs could definitely be something our imaginations commonly may draw upon. This did all really pop off in the 90s during a historic UFO flap where UFOs and mass landing events were reported all around the world, like the Ariel school encounter or the Virginia incident. I want to believe the Shermans, my only hangup is, again, why didn't they ever have even a crappy disposable camera on them, seemingly ever? At least I've never come across any online, but maybe they are out there and I'm wrong, so if I am, please let me know. After the direwolf encounter, I would have some kind of camera on me at all times. But I know that I do tend to believe George Knapp and that Robert Bigelow and the NIDS team experiences are fairly well documented and believable. The question is, what do you guys believe? Please email me at paranormalcommunitycollege@gmail.com or message me on Instagram or TikTok to share your thoughts. Instagram is at Paranormal Community College and TikTok is at PCC Podcast. Or if you have any other paranormal stories you'd like to share at all, doesn't have to be about Skinwalker Ranch, please reach out. So there we have it, folks. I hope you enjoyed this strange Skinwalker journey. This is a topic I'll probably revisit at a later date, and kudos to all the people out there who have tried and or are actively still trying to solve the mystery of Skinwalker Ranch. But thank you guys so much for listening. I really can't wait to get into more paranormal topics, and for Friday's episode, I'm actually leaving it up to you guys. Would you rather hear about the 1973 Pascagoula alien abduction case or near-death experiences? I'll start recording on Wednesday evening, so head over to Instagram or the Facebook group and place your votes. So until then, take care of yourselves, people, and try to steer clear of the path of the Skinwalker, please.